Hi, my dearest family. Today we are going to be talking about a very special chart. And we are going to be talking about it because a student of mine asked about it. And the question was, what happens when the chart ruler and the final dispositor are in a tough aspect? And this is a super good question. There are many ways of determining if someone has got a challenging chart, but I think this is one of the most challenging when we've got the chart ruler and the final dispositor are in a tough aspect. A tough aspect, we might mean conjunction, opposition, or square. Of course, it's going to be highly determined by what the planets are, what sign and house they fall into. Because if they fall into, for example, the dark houses, 6, 8, and 12, that even makes the scenario tougher. So let's just talk about it from the beginning. What is the chart ruler? The chart ruler is the ruling planet of your ascendant or so-called rising sign. So the chart ruler is the planet that rules your ascendant. It represents you, your personality, your physical body, your immediate default approach to life. It's kind of like the vehicle that you drive. Then we've got the final dispositor. And what is that? That is the planet that all other planets in the chart, or at least a majority, ultimately answers to through a chain of rulership. So basically, the final dispositor is always a planet that is in rulership. If you have got more planets in rulership, it means that you have got more final dispositors. For example, imagine that we've got Mars in Aries or Saturn in Capricorn. Basically, that's going to become the CEO of your chart. That's going to be the ultimate underlying motivation or the grand strategy your soul is working on. So I do have got actually my own chart that I would like you to see as an example. So you will see that the final dispositor of my chart is going to be Jupiter. Jupiter, because that's in rulership, and you can see that the moon is reporting to Jupiter. Uranus is going to be reporting to Jupiter. Neptune will be reporting to Jupiter. And because Venus and Mars are in Pisces, they are also reporting to Jupiter as well. So if we wanted to kind of create a dispositor chain, imagine that we've got Jupiter right on the top, and that's going to be the CEO. And those planets would come underneath. So Venus would be one of the pretty much of the reporting planet, and then Mars, and then the Moon, and then Jupiter, and Uranus, and Neptune. All those planets would belong to Jupiter. Now, for example, underneath Venus, there would be Pluto. So let me just kind of like do a paintbrush and I'm gonna try to do it as greatly as possible. Okay. So I'm going to put Jupiter right on the top here because that's the final dispositor. It's a planet that is in rulership. Then underneath, we would have Venus. Then we would have Mars. And then we would have the Moon. Try to make it look like a moon. And then we would have Neptune. Um, and then we would have Uranus. Okay, so Uranus would be coming there. Now, because I've got Venus reporting to Jupiter, and therefore you would be looking at, do I have got any planets in the sign of Venusian sign? So I've got Pluto. So Pluto would be coming here underneath, right here. And then we've got a dispositor chain. Okay. So, by the way, I will be holding a webinar about this coming up in December, the first week of December, and I'm going to teach you how to read these together. Because you might see that Pluto is not in aspect to Venus, but actually they do belong together. So, I want to kind of hold a webinar about it that you guys can understand your chart from a different perspective. But anyway, so this is the dispositorship. And that's it. So that's how you are going to be determining basically a dispositor chain. Yeah, you might be having a question. Yes, Victor, what happens if I don't have a final dispositor? Then it's going to look completely different. But that's not the topic that I wanted to talk to you about. So the final dispositor of your chart, the ascendant ruler, is going to be a personal identity, which is in direct conflict with your own ultimate motivation. You can think of a final dispositor as a planet that represents your soul mission, basically. This isn't simply a bad habit. It's more of a core existential battle. It's as if the driver of the car, which is you, is actively fighting the engine's design or the GPS. Obviously, the GPS is trying to tell you where to go, and then you're fighting against it. So, what happens when the chart ruler is in square, for example, with the final dispositor? Well, basically, you are constantly at cross purposes with yourself. The actions you take, as the chart ruler, to be you, seem to be block or undermine your deeper ultimate goals. So basically, that's what we call as self-sabotage. And it's kind of like a frustrating one step forward and two steps backwards type of energy. Imagine, for example, that your chart ruler is Mars in Libra. And what does Mars in Libra want? It wants to build relationship and keep the peace. But your final dispositor, for example, Saturn in Capricorn, has an ultimate motive of building a very powerful career. So every time you try to be nice and collaborate, the kind of inner CEO feels compromised. And every time you try to be ruthless in your career, your personality feels inauthentic. I feel guilty about it. Because, of course, Mars in Libra is looking at the needs of other people as well. So, this aspect somehow demands action and construction as well. You cannot ignore either planet. This is kind of like a creative force pushing you to build a new structure or a unique life path that honors both energies, but it's difficult. So you must learn to make your actions serve your agenda in a way that doesn't feel like it's a total compromise. What happens if the chart ruler is in an opposition to the final dispositor? Then basically you are torn. You experience your life as a series of either or choices. You are kind of like swinging wildly between these two energies. And the conflict feels like an internal blockage. It feels like that it's impossible to balance it out. Because oppositions often manifest through the seventh house, which is the representation of relationships. Most likely, you will be projecting one of these planets onto other people. So you, which is of course the chart ruler, will feel that other people are constantly challenging you, opposing you, demanding something of you, and that is in conflict with your own identity. Again, because it's an opposition, the goal is to integrate and to balance out. You must own both sides of the pole. You have to realize that the person or situation out there that is opposing you is actually a mirror of your own internal and ultimate drives. And then what happens if the chart ruler conjuncts the final dispositor? This isn't always tough, actually. But there is intensity and lack of objectivity involved, though, here. It is still an overwhelming, usually obsessive fusion of self and purpose. There is no separation between who you are and what your ultimate drive is. And like I said, it could be incredibly powerful. Think of a person whose identity is completely merged with their life work. It can also be tough because it can lead to fanaticism, burnout, or my way or the highway, kind of like the tunnel vision. So, and therefore we might end up lacking the perspective to see or value any other way of living or being. So, a couple of extra notes that I want to make here because the chart ruler can also become your final dispositor, just like in my own chart. And this is actually a different scenario. So imagine that you have got an Aries rising sign, therefore the ruler of your rising sign is Mars, and Mars is going to be in Aries. So Mars is going to become the final dispositor of your chart as well. And this is not tough, okay? This is basically, we call it as a soul dispositor chart, which indicates someone who is extremely self-sufficient, power, and focus. But it can, of course, lead to self-absorption and lack of flexibility as well. Also, remember, not all charts have a final dispositor. Um, it's actually quite rare when a chart, has got just one final dispositor. Many charts, for example, have got loops, which is planetary mutual receptions, like Moon in Taurus and Venus in Cancer. That's a type of dispositor tree as well. Or maybe you have two or more final planets, which creates a more complex, less hierarchical power structure. So that was one of the questions that came up from a student of mine. I hope this helps. And I wasn't sharing the screen. Oh, yes, I was sharing the screen. Okay. So I hope this helps. And if you are interested in learning a little bit more about dispositors, then you might want to check out my website because there will be one on in December, the first week of December, and we are going to talk about how to interpret these and what additional layer it could be giving you, being able to understand, of course, your own chart. So good luck, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye bye.